AITA for refusing to give my mother access to my savings account even though she says it's for family emergencies. When I was 18 years old, I started my first full-time job. It wasn't glamorous or particularly exciting, but it paid the bills, and more importantly, it gave me a sense of independence. My parents had always been hardworking, but money was tight growing up, so I learned the value of $1 early on. From that very first paycheck, I started saving. At first, it was just a small portion, whatever I could spare after contributing to household expenses. But over the years, as I moved into better-paying jobs and grew more disciplined, my savings started to build up. By the time I turned 24, I had a solid emergency fund and a separate account earmarked for a down payment on a house. My parents have always known I'm good with money. It's something I've taken pride in, especially since I know how hard they've worked to provide for me and my siblings. My mom, in particular, has always commented on how responsible I am with my finances, often saying, "You're so smart with money. I wish I had been more like you at your age." I'd smile at her words, but deep down, I knew that part of my motivation came from seeing how much they struggled. I wanted to break that cycle, not just for me but for any future family I might have. Things started to shift about 6 months ago. My mom began dropping hints that the family was going through a rough patch financially. My dad's hours at work had been cut, and my younger brother had been dealing with some health issues that required regular doctor visits. On top of that, their car broke down, and the repair bill was astronomical. I stepped in where I could. I paid for groceries for a few months, helped cover some of the utility bills, and even chipped in for my brother's school supplies and extracurricular fees. It wasn't easy, but I didn't mind. They're my family, and I love them. But recently, my mom's requests have become more intense. One evening, after dinner, she sat me down and brought up the family's financial situation again. This time, though, she had a specific ask. She wanted access to my savings account. Not just to borrow money or ask for help when needed, but full, unrestricted access. She framed it as a precaution, saying that with all the unexpected expenses lately, it would be helpful for her to have the ability to withdraw money quickly if an emergency came up. I was stunned. I didn't know how to respond at first. I took a deep breath and calmly explained that while I understood the pressure she was under, I wasn't comfortable giving her access to my account. I told her that I had worked hard for that money and that it was meant for my future, a future I'd been dreaming of for years. I also reminded her that I'd been more than willing to help out when real emergencies arose and assured her I'd continue to do so. But handing over control of my savings? That was a line I wasn't willing to cross. She didn't take it well. Her face fell, and she immediately started accusing me of not trusting her. She said I was being selfish and that I cared more about my money than my family. It broke my heart to hear her say that, especially since I've always tried to do right by them. But I stood my ground. I repeated that I was happy to help in emergencies, but I needed to retain control over my finances. Over the next few days, the tension in the house was palpable. My mom barely spoke to me, and when she did, it was short and curt. My dad stayed out of it entirely, which is pretty typical for him. He's the quiet, non-confrontational type. But my older sister, who moved out a couple of years ago, decided to weigh in. She called me out of the blue, and the conversation started off friendly enough, but it quickly turned into a lecture. She told me I was overreacting and being paranoid. "Mom's not going to drain your account," she said. "She just wants to make sure the family has a safety net. Isn't that what you've been saving for anyway? To help the people you love." Her words stung. I tried to explain my perspective, but she didn't seem to understand. She kept pushing the idea that family comes first and that saving money is pointless if I'm not willing to use it when they need it. I hung up the phone feeling even worse than before. Since then, the situation has only escalated. My mom has started making passive-aggressive comments every time money comes up in conversation. If I buy something for myself, like a new pair of shoes or a book, she'll say things like, "Must be nice to have money to spend on luxuries." My sister continues to text me, trying to guilt-trip me into giving in. And while my dad hasn't said a word about it, I can feel his discomfort every time the topic comes up. I feel torn. On one hand, I love my family and want to help them. I know they've sacrificed so much for me over the years, and I don't take that for granted. But on the other hand, I don't think it's fair, or safe, for me to hand over control of my savings. I've worked so hard to get to this point, and the thought of losing that security makes me anxious. I've tried to explain this to my mom, but she just doesn't seem to understand. To her, my refusal is a sign of distrust and selfishness. Part of me wonders if I'm being too rigid. Maybe I should just give her access and hope for the best. But another part of me knows that once I cross that line, there's no going back. It's not just about the money, it's about boundaries and the sense of independence I've worked so hard to build. So here I am, feeling stuck and unsure of what to do. Am I being unreasonable? Is my family right? Should I just trust my mom and give her what she's asking for, or am I right to hold my ground? I don't know. All I know is that this situation has made me question everything, and I hate that something as simple as money has come between me and the people I care about most. Update 1. After a week of tense silence, my mom finally approached me again. It was late in the evening after dinner, and I was in my room trying to unwind when she knocked on the door and asked if we could talk. Her tone was softer this time, almost hesitant, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of hope that maybe things were going to be okay. I set aside my book and nodded, inviting her to sit down. She began by apologizing for her earlier outburst. She admitted that she had been unfair to me, and her accusations of selfishness and distrust were coming more from a place of stress than genuine belief. Hearing her apologize caught me off guard. My mom isn't someone who easily admits when she's wrong, so I knew this must have been weighing heavily on her. She then started explaining that the family's financial problems were much worse than she initially let on. She confessed that they're at risk of losing the house. They've fallen behind on mortgage payments, and while she and my dad had been trying to catch up, the recent string of unexpected expenses had derailed their efforts. She told me that's why she was so desperate to access my savings, not for frivolous spending or even just to alleviate temporary financial strain, but to prevent something catastrophic. I sat there, stunned, as she continued to lay out just how dire things had become. Hearing that my parents might lose the house was a gut punch. This is the home I grew up in, the place where so many of my memories were made. The thought of them losing it made my heart ache. And yet, I couldn't shake the lingering frustration over why I was only hearing about this now. I asked her, as gently as I could, why she hadn't been more open with me from the beginning. Why did she wait until things were this bad to come to me? And why had she gone straight to asking for access to my account instead of having an honest conversation about what was happening? That's when she dropped another bombshell, the kind of revelation that leaves you questioning everything. The mortgage wasn't the only problem. Apparently, a few years ago, my dad had taken out a significant loan to help my older sister start a business. It was something he had done quietly, without telling me or my younger brother. My mom said that at the time, they had been optimistic about my sister's business idea and believed it would be a success. But things didn't go as planned. The business failed within its first year, and my sister was left unable to repay the money. Since then, my parents have been quietly trying to cover the debt while also keeping up with their other financial obligations. Hearing this was like being hit by a truck. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Not only had my parents taken on this massive financial burden for my sister, but she hadn't said a word to me about it. Instead, she had been the loudest voice in guilting me about helping the family. All those calls and messages telling me I should do my part and think about what's best for everyone, all while knowing full well that her failed business was a huge part of why things were so bad. My mom admitted that my sister had been pressuring her to ask me for help. My sister had apparently said it was only fair since I'm the most financially stable in the family. She framed it as though I was the logical choice, the one who could afford to bail everyone out. Hearing this made my blood boil. My sister had painted herself as a concerned family member, acting like she was just trying to mediate and encourage me to step up, when in reality, she was actively hiding her role in the mess. She had been complicit in pushing my mom to make me feel guilty, all while conveniently leaving out the part where her failed business had played a significant role in creating the situation. I felt a mix of emotions, anger, betrayal, sadness, and a deep sense of exhaustion. I didn't know what to say to my mom. Part of me wanted to yell, to ask her why they had kept this from me, why they hadn't told me about the loan years ago when they first took it out. But another part of me just felt tired. I was tired of feeling like I had to be the responsible one, the one who always had to step up because others had made mistakes. I sat there in silence as my mom continued. She told me she didn't want to burden me with all of this, especially since I'd been doing so well for myself. She said they had hoped to handle it on their own, but things had spiraled out of control. She also admitted that my sister's constant insistence had influenced her decision to approach me about my savings in the first place. My mom said she felt caught between trying to protect me and trying to keep the family afloat, and in the end, her desperation had won out. I didn't know how to respond. I love my mom, and I could see how much pain and stress she was carrying. But I couldn't ignore the betrayal I felt, not just from her, but from my sister, too. It felt like everyone had been keeping secrets, and now they were all coming to light at once. I felt overwhelmed and unsure of what to do. I wanted to help my family, I really did. But I also felt like I needed to protect myself. I had worked so hard to build financial stability, and the idea of jeopardizing that because of decisions I wasn't even consulted on felt deeply unfair. I decided to take a step back and think things through. I told my mom I needed time to process everything and figure out what I could realistically do to help without putting my own future at risk. She seemed to understand, but the tension in the house remained. My sister, on the other hand, hasn't said a word to me since I found out about the loan. I'm not sure if it's because she feels guilty or because she's upset that I haven't immediately swooped in to fix everything. I still don't know what the right move is. Part of me feels like I should step up and do whatever it takes to help my parents keep the house. But another part of me feels like I've already done so much, and it's not fair to ask me to shoulder even more of the burden, especially when I wasn't part of the decisions that led to this mess in the first place. All I know is that this situation has left me feeling more conflicted and hurt than ever. Update 2. After learning about the loan and my sister's involvement, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something still wasn't adding up. The whole situation felt murky, like there were layers to this mess that I hadn't uncovered yet. My family's behavior had already eroded my trust, and the more I thought about it, the more uneasy I felt. I needed clarity, and I decided the only way to get it was to dig deeper. One evening, while my parents were out running errands, I found myself in the living room. My mom had been sorting through some paperwork earlier that day, and a stack of documents was still sitting on the coffee table. At first, I hesitated. It felt invasive to go through her things, but then I reminded myself that I wasn't doing this out of spite, I just wanted answers. I started flipping through the pile, carefully sifting through bank statements, utility bills, and random receipts. Most of it was exactly what I expected, evidence of overdue payments and mounting financial stress. But then I stumbled across something that didn't fit. It was a bank statement for an account I didn't recognize. The account wasn't in my name or the joint account my parents use for household bills, it was solely in my mom's name. And the most shocking part? It had a balance of several $1,000s. I stared at the statement, my heart racing. I felt like I'd uncovered a secret I wasn't supposed to know. My first thought was disbelief. How could they be in such dire straits, to the point of asking me for access to my savings, when my mom had a substantial amount tucked away in this account? My mind raced with possibilities. Maybe this was money she'd forgotten about, or maybe it was earmarked for something specific that I didn't know about. But even if that were the case, why hadn't she mentioned it when she was pleading with me to help them? When my parents got home, I couldn't keep it to myself. I confronted my mom almost immediately. At first, she tried to deny it. She acted confused, asking what I was talking about, but I wasn't buying it. I pulled out the statement and handed it to her. Her expression changed instantly. She looked cornered, like a deer caught in headlights. After a long pause, she admitted that the account was hers and that she'd been setting aside money for years. She explained that the money was meant to be a last resort emergency fund. She said she was terrified of touching it because she wanted to make sure it was there in case something catastrophic happened, something even worse than their current financial troubles. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They were at risk of losing the house, they had begged me for help, and yet here she was, sitting on thousands of dollars. Her reasoning didn't sit right with me. If this wasn't a financial emergency, what was? And if she was so determined to preserve this last resort fund, why was she so quick to come after my savings? The more I thought about it, the more frustrated I became. It felt like my hard work and sacrifices were being taken for granted. They had their own safety net, but instead of using it, they had decided I was the solution to their problems. After my conversation with my mom, I reached out to my sister. I needed to know if she was aware of this account. Her reaction was telling. When I mentioned the statement, she seemed genuinely surprised. She claimed she didn't know anything about it and sounded almost as shocked as I had been. But then, after a moment of silence, she quickly changed the subject. She muttered something about needing to go and hung up. Since then, she hasn't texted or called me. Her sudden silence only added to my growing sense of betrayal. Whether she knew about the account or not, it was clear she wanted no part in addressing the situation. It felt like she was retreating, leaving me to deal with the fallout alone. Over the next few days, I found myself oscillating between anger and relief. My family had guilt me, shamed me, and pressured me into feeling like I was their only hope. They had played on my love for them and my sense of responsibility, all while withholding critical information. I don't know whether to feel relieved that they have some money or even angrier that they weren't upfront with me. It's starting to feel like I'm being used, and I don't know how to move forward. Update 3. After weeks of back-and-forth arguments, I reached my breaking point. The tension at home had become unbearable, and every interaction with my mom and sister felt like walking on eggshells. No matter how much I tried to explain my position, it was clear that they saw me as nothing more than a safety net, a solution to their problems rather than a person with boundaries and feelings. I realized I couldn't think clearly in that environment, let alone figure out my next steps. So, I made a decision: I needed to leave. A close friend of mine, someone who had been a pillar of support throughout this ordeal, offered me a place to stay temporarily. She could see how much this situation was affecting me, and she encouraged me to take a step back for my own well-being. It wasn't an easy decision, but deep down, I knew it was the right one. I needed space to breathe, to think, and to distance myself from the constant guilt-tripping and manipulation. I started packing my things one quiet afternoon while my parents were out. As I went through my drawers, sorting through clothes and personal items, I realized something was missing: my checkbook. I rarely use it, it's mostly for emergencies or the odd expense that requires a physical check, but I always keep it in a specific drawer in my desk. At first, I thought I might have misplaced it. I tore apart the drawer, then moved on to other parts of my room, searching through every nook and cranny. But it was nowhere to be found. A sinking feeling settled in my stomach. I couldn't ignore the timing or the context. Given everything that had been happening, the possibility that someone in my family might have taken it felt all too real. Trying to push down my growing anxiety, I logged into my bank account to check for any unusual activity. What I found made my heart stop. There were 2 large pending transactions that I hadn't authorized, both written as checks. The amounts were significant, enough to make a serious dent in my savings. My hands started shaking as I stared at the screen, disbelief and panic washing over me. I immediately called my bank to flag the transactions. Thankfully, because they were still pending, the bank was able to put a hold on them and assured me they'd be investigated. Once I'd secured my accounts, my panic gave way to anger. I couldn't believe what was happening. Someone had taken my checkbook, forged my signature, and tried to drain my account, and I had a sickeningly clear idea of who it might be. When my mom got home later that day, I confronted her. I didn't beat around the bush or sugarcoat anything. I told her I knew about the unauthorized checks and demanded to know if she had anything to do with it. At first, she denied it, her face a mixture of shock and offense. But as I pressed her, her defenses crumbled. She broke down, tears streaming down her face, and admitted that she had taken my checkbook. Her explanation felt like a slap in the face. She said she thought I wouldn't notice a few withdrawals since I'm so good at saving. She tried to justify her actions by saying she was desperate and had no other options. The worst part was that she didn't even seem to fully grasp the gravity of what she'd done. To her, it was a small misstep in the face of a larger crisis. To me, it was a betrayal of the highest order. That was the final straw. Any lingering sense of obligation or guilt I'd felt about helping them vanished in that moment. I realized that if I didn't set firm boundaries now, this cycle of manipulation and entitlement would never end. I called my bank again and had them put extra security measures on all my accounts. I locked down online access, added two-factor authentication, and requested alerts for any unusual activity. I wasn't taking any chances. I also made the difficult decision to cut off all financial support to my family, at least for the foreseeable future. I couldn't trust them anymore, and until they could prove otherwise, I wasn't willing to put myself at risk again. My dad apologized profusely when he found out what had happened. He seemed genuinely remorseful, and part of me believed that he hadn't been involved in the checkbook incident. But his silence and passivity throughout this entire ordeal had allowed things to escalate to this point, and I couldn't overlook that. My mom, on the other hand, doubled down. She accused me of overreacting and said I was being heartless by abandoning the family in their time of need. She kept insisting that she had only done what she thought was necessary and that I'd understand one day, when I had a family of my own. My sister chimed in too, calling me selfish and cold. Her words stung, especially given that she played such a significant role in the family's financial troubles. I couldn't believe the audacity. They still had the money in my mom's hidden account. They had resources they could tap into, yet they continued to paint me as the villain. It was clear that they had no intention of taking accountability for their actions or addressing the deeper issues that had led to this mess.